So let's outline very briefly what pressed phonation is, the issue that we're identifying here, and also then outline what are some key things that a singer can look out for in their own voice, and what can they do to bring about better balance in their phonatory patterns.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
So I think the big ballpark thing that we're looking at with pressed phonation is hyperadduction of the vocal folds, which just means that when they're brought together and they're invited to phonate, to vibrate, they're brought together too close together. And this sets the vocal folds into a place that once they are pushed apart, it requires more force to get them to move apart because they're hyperadducted, hyper brought together, that they will not only be pushed apart, but they'll be pushed up and then apart. And then when they come back down with this whip-like motion, which is what creates issues at the vocal fold level often.
Yeah.
So that's the underpinnings of pressed phonation, is this excessive resistance at the level of the vocal folds due to hyperadduction.
What are some things that we can, as singers, the people who are part of our community here at Voice Essentials, what can people be doing to look to not have that level of whiplash of the vocal folds?
Yeah, so I think one of the main things I love considering, actually, Renee said it. She said it, and I'm always forgetting who worked with whom in teachers. I always remember one of my favorite sopranos of all time, Leontine Price. She always said that you should sing on the interest, not the principle.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Renee said. So they may have had the same teacher. Well, we can figure that out. We'll do that research. I forgot. But I know it came from the teacher. But Leontine was saying that, and the basic idea is, right, if you've got $1,000 in your account, that's a certain amount of money, and the interest you'd get on it in most accounts would be 10 cents,
Yeah.
Like very, very little bit of money. And so sing on that, and they're equating that to effort level.
Yeah.
So first thing is developing some kind of barometer to have awareness of effort level. And so if you feel like you are really working hard physically, you're probably on the path of pressed phonation.
Yeah.
And you can think about it. One of the ways to think about it is for quiet speech, there's a driving force that in science terms would be around 3 to 4 centimeters of water column. Should I explain that kind of idea of what that is, or is that too heady?
No, you go for it.
Okay, so if you're using like force to move air, there's a U-shaped tube. I'll use it. It's like this.
Yeah.
And if you fill this U-shaped tube with water, if there's no pressure on either side, the areas will be level.
Yeah.
If you then held that and you applied pressure just by going, oh, like that into the tube, it's going to displace the water. So this side will go up and this side will go down. The distance it moves, that's the measure for pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So for quiet speech, it moves 3 to 4 centimeters, and then it gets up to around 9 or 10 for more declamatory speech. For the loudest singing sounds, it's estimated between 20 and 70 centimeters of water column will be displaced. And then you can relate that to lifting weights, like the effort of that kind of feeling. And that's about 150 centimeters of water column. So more than double. So I always tell folks that are like really singing with a tremendous amount of effort, I said, if it feels close to weightlifting, you're off the charts compared to the loudest possible vocal sounds measured. And I've actually measured some of my loudest classical colleagues here with a pressure transducer. And for the loudest sounds, they were in the low 60s. Like 63 centimeters of water column, 64. So just drawing that is really important. And I've also measured, I had, at one of the courses I taught with Johan, there were some music theater singers there that were practicing belt. Yeah. And so we do master classes there, and we do all styles. And they said, can we measure our water, our centimeters of water column? And they were singing what I would consider more of a yell than a belt. A belt is a skilled high-level maneuver that sounds kind of shouty, but it's not at all from a effort level at the vocal folds. And they measured it, and again, they were like at 130 centimeters of water column. It was like blown out beyond belief. So just knowing that the right thing and the things that have been measured, they are in much lower drive, much lower pressure than a yell or something super primal.
Yes. It is important to recognize that volume doesn't need to come from effort. Volume can come from resonance. And when you build the right resonance strategy, the volume presents itself. Anyway, I want to play the devil's advocate for him. Oh, so you go for it.
Well, I was going to say, so the other thing is, so effort's one of the big things. Get somebody in touch with effort and give them an A, B, C, and they'll start to go, oh yeah, this was so much easier. I choose B. And then they'll start to get this barometer going.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, I always consider this is a flow vibrator. That's Dr. Dosher, my mentor, Dr. Barbara Dosher, she has that in her book. And I've always thought this is the way to consider it. I'm sure others have considered it this way too, but a flow vibrator, meaning that there's a pressure coming from the thoracic cavity, maybe even the abdomen can also contribute to increasing the thoracic cavity. And that drives a flow that moves through the vocal folds and pushes them apart and begins vibration. So it's a flow vibrator. And so I feel like if someone also loses track of the flow, even a breathy, if they lose track of that as they start to resist more, like I just did in speaking, and it no longer feels like this constantly moving column of air, people will say, or this constantly moving stream of air, then that's also problematic. If it gets too dammed up, that's another way that we can think of it. Does it feel like a flow vibrator, or does it feel like you're and hitting a ceiling? And the ceiling would be hyperadduction.
Hyperadduction. How do we measure the aesthetic against the function? Can we have our cake and eat it as well?
Definitely. There's no question. But the issue right now is that most training and even discussions, especially within contemporary music styles, I've heard it just uttered out loud that the aesthetic that they want, that drives the way we're supposed to train our singers. Completely wrong, in my opinion. Not to be, and I only say that because I work with a tremendous number of folks who are recovering from injuries from press phonation.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks, I'm blessed to work with some rather well-known folks who hit a wall in their 30s, hit a wall in their 40s, hit a wall in their 50s. And guess what? They never want to stop. They don't want to stop. They're not ready to hit a wall. Yeah. And they're very well known for a voice production that got them the Grammys that they have, that got them, and go down the list, right? The awards that they've won and the popularity they have, but it's not sustainable for them.
Yeah.
And so we really have to look at sustainability. I think that is the key thing. And like you said, they're headed for that. And so we need to tease out the aesthetic. Yeah. And while we're still honoring it, we have to first start with sustainable function. And then it's very easy to manipulate the way you use resonance, the way you use occasional, even if it's growly singing or whatever, you can do growls with no problem whatsoever. They actually often act as like a semi-occluded vocal tract posture, but it's a learned thing. Some people do it automatically, they're lucky, and other people do it with their vocal folds instead of the tissue above, the false folds or the tissue above. And then they end up in trouble. So you can learn how to do all kinds of heavy metal stuff. You can do all kinds of noisy sounds and growly blues without issue at the vocal fold level. Yeah. So I think kind of teasing that out, that it's like, first, let's get the function going. And then what do you want to do here? How do you want this to be edgy? Well, here's how you do it. You can do it with velopharyngeal opening, but which tilts the spectrum from more low to less high to all of a sudden more high. So it'll sound more edgy, and so just knowing how to manipulate these variables gives the person the power and sort of the autonomy
Yeah.
you know, to be their own creator, you know, but they need to know the variables. That's the thing. We should be teaching these variables to our students and make them super specific, so then they can decide the color palettes they want to engage in very mindfully.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we need to be cognizant of too is that you need to be, when we think about sustainability around our voicing, we need to be thinking about your voice at its worst of times, not expecting to be in an optimal health, optimal condition 100% of the time. That's completely unrealistic. And I think we need to be able to sustain any voicing when we're tired, but if you are only able to do these voicings when you're at absolute peak performance, that is a recipe for disaster. These singers who will comment about on the reaction videos, often we're talking about them when they're in great condition, but eventually that voice will hit a gig where they unfortunately have to sing in a compromised state. That's when the voice is at danger, right?
Yes, exactly. That's where the interest, not the principal concept comes in.
Yes.
If you're learning to sing on less effort, then there's a little more effort required. You've got a little bit of wiggle room there to up a breath energy, to circumvent, or do something to twist around the issue you have, whether it's just slight swelling because of issues, or with a cold that you have, or a cough, or didn't get enough sleep. And you need to be aiming towards that. Absolutely. And also for the people who tour and are really well known, they've got to be aiming towards I gave 3 interviews and then this, and then had to do a demo here, and then I had to go on stage, and then I flew overnight to Europe, and then I was on that the next night, without any break. And again, we also need to work as a team. And I've done this where I'll actually be in touch with the agents and just say, this schedule is untenable. I mean, if there's anything you can do and front load with this and give 2 days here, and change it. I think that we also need to, as a team, be thinking about that too. What makes it sustainable and helps the singer stay sane.
Yeah.
That's so hard, with all those pressures.